God Hears Her.
God Hears Her.
God Hears Her is brought to you
by Our Daily Bread Ministries.
Visit GodHearsHer.org.
Visit GodHearsHer.org.
Or find us on social for more information.
I just now feel like stable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know God, He's my rock. I know what He says about me, but I still have my moments when I'm like, am I safe?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a guy, he's looking after me. He's looking after my daughter. There are still moments when I can feel the anxiety rise up at night or in a short nap. Just a small little moments.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh gosh, am I going to be able to go to sleep? I'm really tired. If I don't go to sleep, it's just, it's the day walk.
Yeah.
And it could potentially not get easy. And that's okay.
You're listening to God Hears Her, a podcast for women where we explore the stunning truth that God hears you, He sees you, and He loves you because you are His. Find out how these realities free you today on God Hears Her.
Welcome to God Hears Her. I'm Erin Eddy.
And I'm Elisa Morgan. What brokenness do you have in your past? Is it spiritual or emotional brokenness? Did something happen in your family? Have you experienced physical trauma or unhealthy expectations? We all experience brokenness and trauma, and whether we realize it or not, the painful moments in our lives shape us. And for some, the darkest moments of the past can end up defining the future. Well, today, Toni Collier joins God Hears Her to share her story of how God worked through several tough situations in her life to lead her to the conclusion that broken crayons still color.
Toni Collier is, first of all, one of my best friends in the world. She was there for me during several super dark moments in my life, and I've been able to walk through some things with her too. She's also a gifted communicator and a consultant from North Point Ministries. But her deepest passion is an online community for women called Crayons Still Color, which exists to remind all of us that our past doesn't have to define our present or our future.
Let's get to our conversation with Toni as she describes the middle space between being imperfect and striving for perfection. This is God Hears Her.
There is a balance between being imperfect and striving for perfection. And I think the middle is hard to sit in. How do we balance that? And I think sometimes we can fall into this idea of, oh man, we're so imperfect that there really isn't much that we can do. And I think also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think trauma and hard experiences, they rob us of something, especially as kids.
That's interesting.
We lose the awe and the wonder and the discovery and the bigness of God because of how big our trials and tribulations have been. And so then for me, financial poverty, relational poverty, spiritual poverty, when you experience those things, it makes God so much smaller. And so then we don't think there's enough available for us to win and to prosper and to blossom and to be happy sometimes even.
So would you say that our family dynamics or things that have happened to us or we've found ourselves making wrong choices, all of those things lead us to a space of brokenness?
Man. Okay, I'll start with a story. I was at the Dove Awards 2 years ago. Beth Moore was sitting a few rows from me, and I'm like fangirling on the inside.
You're like taking a selfie of your mom and you and Beth.
And I almost broke my neck trying to see her all night. Was she going to go to the bathroom? Should I go to the bathroom? You know? But also I was just like, I'm not going to show it. Like, I'm too cool, you know? But my husband knew because I was going through one of her studies at the time with my counselor. It's called So Long Insecurity, You've Been a Bad Friend to Us. Yeah. And it was wrecking me and changing me and healing these broken places. And so my husband said, you need to go up, talk to her afterwards. I was like, no, oh my gosh, no. He's like, you're going to go up. I'm like, no, I'm fine. And he's like, Beth. I'm like, no. And she turns around and I was like, hey. And my husband was like, this is my wife and she's going through your, study right now. And then she touches me on my arm and she said, for some of us girls, it's just going to be hard. she said, you'll look to your left and your right. You'll make the mistake of looking left and right. And you'll compare yourself to people whose stories may not be as hard as yours. And you'll be like, well, why, God? Why are you doing that through them in that way? Why is it so easy for them? And I mean, I know they have some imperfections, but gosh, they didn't go through what I went through and the trauma. And she said, but God does something so great in the valleys. And it was from that moment when I looked back at my story and was appreciative of my brokenness because I wore a different armor. I had more of a confidence walking into it, knowing, hey, my story, it just may be hard for me. And that was a changing point in my life, because the 25 years preceding that moment with Beth was just brokenness. In the third grade, my mom had a massive stroke. Paralyzed on her left side. She was the breadwinner. She had the degree. My dad did not. So he went to work and was just totally absent.
And did your mom recover?
So here's the story, girlfriend. Just one thing after the other medically. And so I ended up taking care of my mom from third grade, 8 years old, all the way up to maybe about high school, when I graduated high school. And my two older brothers, we were a blended family. They went to live with their moms because my mom was now disabled, so she couldn't do all the things that she used to be able to do. So our family broke apart. My dad was verbally abusive, and I'm just a hard man, never proud. And so there was some validation issues there, so much insecurity. And my counselor calls it parentified child syndrome, where there's this natural progression where, parents meet kids. And you kind of flip it on its head, and then you kind of start taking care of the parent. Well, mine happened so early,
so young,
that all of my awe and my wonder as a child just, disappeared, because I had to run the house and take care of her. I had to be the parent.
Yeah.
And so, but gosh, such a walking miracle my mom is. And she went to therapy, got her, feeling back in her left side, and started walking again. And we found blood clots, and we got rid of those. And she lost her large intestine, and miraculously she could survive off of her small intestine. It was just like one thing after the other, and it was just hard. I felt so unprotected my entire life, like I wasn't safe. Like the only one that was protecting me was me. And ended up with so many validation issues. And at 13, I lost my virginity in high school. Guy was sexually manipulative. He was 18. And went through that and stayed with the guy, and he cheated on me with my best friend, and ended up leaving my parents' house at 16, thinking I was going to marry this guy, and put myself through college, kind of separated myself from my family because it was such a broken place. My brothers got on drugs, and we would have nights where we'd have to go get him out of the crack house. And it was just brokenness, one thing after the other. And went to college. Graduated in 3 years. At 19 years old, I was supposed to go to law school, broke up with that guy. I'm like, I'm back, I'm going to do it. But what really was cultivating in me was a performer's heart, where I just felt like I had to achieve to have someone be proud of me. And I pinged back and forth between validation from men and drugs and alcohol to, well, let me just do the best that I can and everyone will love me. And was supposed to go to law school, but pinged up on the validation thing again, and met this guy in college, dated him for 3 months, and then moved with him to Atlanta. I left Texas. I was like, I'm not going to go to law school. I'm going to start a family. Ended up being an abusive situation, very verbally abusive. There was some physical, a lot of jealousy there. And man, it one thing after the other type thing. And ended up getting a divorce and going to a church, getting saved, and getting hurt by the church too.
Oh, wow.
So very spiritually manipulative.
So there's a lot of hurt.
Oh, yeah.
So when Beth Moore told you that you had this flashback of up to 13 till that point.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, it's not all in vain. I have to use this story. Thought I was going to leave ministry. God scooped me right back up and was like, no, I want to use that broken place.
So how did you get from the place of going, this stuff disqualifies me, to this stuff actually
does qualify my story even more?
And when we come back, Toni will answer Lisa's question about how God led her to the realization that brokenness doesn't disqualify her, but instead qualifies her and you to make a difference in the lives of others. That's coming up on God Hears Her. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the show today, would you please take a minute and write a quick review and rate us on iTunes and really on whatever podcast platform you listen to. Reviews and ratings help us reach more people. because iTunes and other podcast platforms push highly rated shows in front of more people. So if you could take a minute, write a quick review and rate us. That would be so helpful in reaching more women with the message that God hears her.
You're just more than enough. You're more than enough. You and God have gotten everything that you need to make it through this season. He's never left you. He has his hand on you. He is literally sitting on the sidelines of your life saying, put me in. Don't hold on to that. Don't carry that yourself. I want to carry that burden with you. And not only do I want to carry it, but I want to redeem it in you.
Welcome back to God Hears Her. I'm Elisa Morgan.
And I'm Erin Eddy. And in just a moment, we will hear Toni's answer to the question about how God can use our brokenness to qualify us to make a difference in the lives of others. But before we do, just a quick reminder that if you miss anything in today's show, the show notes are available in the podcast description or on our website at godhearsher.org.
The show notes not only contain the talking points for today's episode, you'll also find a link to a free e-booklet titled Clinging to Hope in the Storm. This free e-booklet shows how Jesus is with us in times of struggle. It offers comfort for anyone who's experiencing a difficult season. Just click on the link in the podcast description or on our website at godhearsher.org. That's godhearsher.org.
Now, back to the show. Here's Toni as she answers the question, how did God lead you to the realization that your brokenness didn't disqualify you, but qualified you to share your story and make a difference in the lives of others? This is God Hears Her.
I thought I was done with ministry. A super broken church, and the leader there was just so spiritually manipulative, and I ended up leaving, and I said, well, that's it. I started working for Girl Scout Corporate. I'm like, it's all good. I'm going to be in the nonprofit space. I can still do good in the world. And ended up at Buckhead Church for a meeting that someone asked me to come and creatively speak into. And my now husband was there and literally said, you're supposed to be in ministry and I'm supposed to help you. And I'm like, well, that's really interesting because I'm divorced and I've got a whole bunch of baggage and I don't even know if I believe in the church anymore.
Yeah.
And ended up getting me connected with North Point Ministries under the leadership of Andy Stanley, and it changed my life. They believed in me, gave me baby steps to get back into the faith and stage. I was a youth pastor before I was ordained. I was doing all sorts of public ministry, and North Point gave it back to me. And even more than that, they gave it back to me with the knowledge that I had so much baggage. And I guess it just, the local church saved me for the big C church. And I just, every time I started telling my story, it was as if God was like, well, do it a little bit more. Like, do it a little bit more. See how people respond. And I'm in these healthy environments and I'm getting this new healthy community and people are like, that's amazing. Say more. Tell it again. Tell it again. And now people are being saved and there's more people coming to Christ because of me telling all my dirty stuff. And it was just a weird paradigm shift that I had to go through, a mindset shift that there was a God that wasn't up there with his finger pointing down at me, but instead was like, put me in, coach. I want to trade my power for your weakness. And it was just like, oh, it was like this new, I like a new God had resurfaced. God's like, no. I have a plan for you and a direct connection to you through my son, Jesus. And I want to do so many great things through you and through your brokenness. And I look up now, I'm always talk about my brokenness now.
What were some like tactical things that you did in that journey? Because I mean, you surround yourself with people and you can do all of those things, but what are some like day-to-day things?
Oh man. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, counseling. Like I would shout it from the rooftops. We have 4 counselors in our household. My daughter has a counselor. My husband has a counselor. I have one, and then we have a marriage counselor. And like, I just would shout it from the rooftops over and over and over again. Get counseling, go to counseling, go to counseling. You should go to counseling.
Yeah.
It, and it wasn't just about sitting there telling all that happened. And it was doing the work.
Yeah.
My counselor assigned me specific things. So long insecurity was a big one for me.
Yeah.
Beth Moore's study on chronic insecurity, how to heal that spiritually, was huge turning point for me. EMDR was big for me.
Yeah.
Trauma
That
treatment.
is eye movement.
Yes.
Rapid desensitization. It's a technique that you use, that therapists use with, it's kind of interesting. So you go Google it, EMDR, but it's what it does is it addresses the brain synapses that are broken through trauma and helps them reattach.
This is the best way that I've heard it explained to, aside from that incredible thing that you just gave, was that our lives are like bookshelves.
Yeah.
And you know, if we have our bookshelf all together, it's just perfectly all in line.
Yeah.
What happens typically in our life when we go through trauma is that a little book comes out. It just goes beep. It's just a little bit. And what happens is all of our relational experiences, emotional experiences are now done through the filter of now this riff.
Oh,
and if another piece of trauma happens and there's just a little another book pulled out, there's another riff. And so what EMDR does is it goes back and it just boop, pushes them back in so that you can start to experience life in a way that's a little less filtered through trauma.
Wow.
And so that's what I did.
That God has revealed in the last centuries, the last decades, have been huge for us. So we can take advantage of these things.
Absolutely.
So those were some of the things.
Counseling for sure, EMDR, and then of course friendships. I needed to be fully known. We get on platforms as Christian leaders and we hide. We hide those parts of us. And I had to get some friends that sat with me and said, I want to know everything. Yeah. And I want to love you in it and through it. And so I really had to be known by some people.
One thing that I think happens a lot is we are broken people. And Erin has shared her story. I've shared my story. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. Yeah. And it's not the brokenness that we're lifting up and celebrating, that this is what, you know, this is the greatest thing. But God's presence in the brokenness.
100%.
And his redemption and acceptance of the brokenness and his recreation of the brokenness is the story. And I think a lot of us feel like, well, I'm never going to be fixed enough, if you will, to be used, whether it's in big M ministry or small M ministry, just my day to day. You know, what do you say to that woman who's just going, I'm just now recognizing all the cracks in my being that I've tried to pretend like aren't there. What do you say to her?
Well, I think the first thing we have to address is where that comes from. We say this on the blog all the time. It's, you know, the world has lied to us and told us that we had to be perfect to be used. And media, social media, I mean, it is just this like embodiment of perfection. And I would just say that the truth is God wants to use us in the middle of our mess. It's Paul and what he's saying to the church when they are, you know, kicking people out of the church and when they're being boastful about all that they have. It's him in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. He says that God's telling us, my grace is sufficient for you and your story and your mess and all your stuff. And my power is made perfect in your weakness. But it's the response that we get to have to that truth. And therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses. Why? So that Christ's power will rest on me. He wants to come into that space, but he, you know, is a sovereign God and he's a gentle God and he's jealous for us, but he's also respective of our space and what we will allow for him to come in. And so when we invite God into that space and when we boast about our weakness, he's like, oh, yeah, come on. I've been waiting. I want to just give you all my power, daughter, son. And, if there was not a time, I think this is the best time to get on the bandwagon of vulnerability. Shout out to Brene Brown for bringing that wave so hard and strong. But I think this is the time to walk boldly in it and be unashamed and fearless in this, like, we are broken and we got to get it out there so that we can see God's power do something great in it.
That's beautiful, Toni. Would you say that in the midst of kind of healing, doing all these tactical things, when you start to expose that, because you talk about vulnerability, when you start to be vulnerable and you start to expose it, you do start to feel unlovable because everything starts to become exposed.
Sure.
And it's hard sometimes to believe or even wrap our minds around the fact that God sees us and he hears us and that he loves us when we are exposing everything.
Sure. This is really big for me in counseling because for 25 years, again, I like pushed everything right under, just put it all under there and just tuck it down there and then shove it down. I did that for so long. I never.
And then jump on a little bit harder.
I'm like, whoa, stay in
and
there.
cut off the pieces that try to come out.
Stay in there.
Use double stick tape.
I know, right?
Glue it down.
What most people don't talk about is when you start to expose those traumas, what comes with it? Anxiety.
Yeah.
Because then you're aware of it.
Yes.
I'm putting names to emotions. I'm allowing myself to feel everything. And so then you feel even more broken.
Yeah.
It was, in those moments, you're almost just like, well, should I just not have said anything at all? So I could keep, stuffing it down.
Yeah.
Because you function really well when you stuff it all down.
Literally. And you kind of get numb to the trauma a little bit. But as Brene Brown says, you cannot experience the highest level of joy without allowing yourself to experience the highest level of pain. And what worked for me, my counselor said, when you open yourself up to all this trauma, it's as if you're opening up a bucket and you're just letting it all fly out. Well, when there's so much of it, the top comes off and the bottom does too. So what happens is when like the good stuff starts getting put back into your bucket, your heart, your emotions, your life in general, the bottom is still open. And so then it just falls out. And so it's almost hard to rebuild and to believe in yourself again.
That's good.
So she says that we got to work on not just putting good stuff in the bucket, but sealing the bottom of it. And in order to seal the bottom of it, for us as believers, we believe that's the foundation piece. We got to figure out the truth of what God's saying to us so that we could build the bottom back. So then when my husband says to me, I know that you don't feel lovable, but I'm choosing you and your daughter, and I'm choosing you after you've had a divorce. I'm choosing you after sexual and verbal and physical abuse. Like I'm still choosing you because I love you and you're beautiful. It doesn't just fall out.
Yeah.
That it can stick in because of God's foundational truth in our lives. And so that was just,
And Toni, just to be so gentle here, it takes time.
Oh, yes.
When we discover our brokenness, when we identify it and choose to just gently pry the lid off or pop it off, and we come out and the bottom goes out too. It takes time.
Oh, years
to heal and learn and permission and grace.
Yes.
And because, I think in a conversation that we could have spent 29 hours in, when we're doing 20 minutes in or something, I don't ever want to give anybody the impression that it's just 1, 2, 3.
No.
I dream a genie and you're done. That just doesn't happen.
That's
it takes
really
time.
good. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
It's real. I'm 28. I'm 3 years removed from my first counseling session. If I were to just be real, I just feel stabilized.
Yeah.
Like just now, working through the anxiety, getting the calm weighted blankets, going, meditation, like trying to like all the sleep sounds. And Aaron can attest to this. Like, I just now feel like stable. Like I know God, He's my rock. I know what He says about me, but I still have my moments when I'm like, am I safe?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a guy, he's looking after me. He's looking after my daughter. There are still moments when I can feel the anxiety rise up at night or in a short nap. Just a small little moments.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh gosh, am I going to be able to go to sleep? I'm really tired. If I don't go to sleep, it's just, it's the day walk.
Yeah.
And again, it was the moment with Beth Moore where it's like, it could potentially not get easy. And that's okay.
That just goes to show the power of us being vulnerable and just going, it's going to be hard. Like, it's okay that it's hard. Okay. That gives you permission to walk into and expose those places.
100%. Yeah.
Right. And that's what you do.
Yeah.
With Broken Crayons Still Color. Yeah. And you use that.
I just love it. I get so excited. We have this cool little ministry with a team of 4, including myself, who are just on a mission to create a space for the broken but hopeful woman. And that's what we press into. We're like, hey, we can be broken, girls.
Yeah.
But there's got to be hope. We got to chase after the hope.
Yeah.
That's where the redemption comes in. But and so we have a blog, and we do kind of series format style where we pick a series. Aaron's written on the series, and we write about it for 3 weeks, and we ask questions, and we put hard things out there. But we have biblical truth and sounding. And right now we're in this relationship series, and we partnered with some just incredible like married women that are just bossing it out to give hopefully our women, our readers, just some little nuggets on how to be in a marriage and be broken, and how to, pray about a marriage that you're not in yet. And so it's just weird. It's fun. We've done series on closeness and series on God's vision for our lives. And so it's just crazy. I can't even believe it. So I get to lead this team, and we're just like rallying the troops. We're like, come on. And the reason why we started it and the reason why we got a team is because I just didn't feel like my story was powerful enough to change this narrative in our world that you're to be perfect to be used. And so our hope is that women would come out and be like authentically open and broken and hopeful in the middle of that. And then it would like start this snowball effect where other women feel safe enough to tell theirs. And they run to Jesus.
Take just a minute right now.
Yeah, down.
Yeah, and talk to that woman who is a broken crayon.
Man, you're gonna make
and
me
tell her
cry.
that she can still color. Just speak straight to her
love that.
for just a few
Tell her
minutes.
she can still color.
I would just say, you're just more than enough. You're more than enough. You and God have gotten everything that you need to make it through this season. He's never left you. He has his hand on you. He is literally sitting on the sidelines of your life saying, put me in. Don't hold on to that. Don't carry that yourself. I want to carry that burden with you. And not only do I want to carry it, but I want to redeem it in you. And I want you to write a new story. He's saying, I loved you right in the middle of the brokenness, and I'm going to use you right in the middle of it. And I'm with you in the valley. I'd also say my friend Paul Taylor Smith says this all the time. He says, we serve a God who's not at the end of the tunnel waiting to be the light, but we serve a God that's in the tunnel with us, guiding our footsteps. And so I just hope that you know that you can still color. God still wants to make something beautiful in you.
Jesus often described himself as light in the darkness, and his light brings life. Even in our tunnels of darkness, he is the light.
Yes, he is. For anyone who wants to look through the talking points of today's show, the show notes are available in the podcast description. We've also included the verses mentioned, and we've included a link to Toni's blog, Crayons Still Color. We also have a link to a free e-booklet titled Clinging to Hope in the Storm, which offers comfort for anyone who's experiencing a difficult season. Again, just click on the link in the podcast description or visit our website, godhearsher.org. That's godhearsher.org.
And if you enjoyed today's show, or if you enjoy God Hears Her in general, could you please take a moment to write a review and rate us on whatever podcast platform on which you listen? Ratings and reviews help us reach more women with the message that God hears her.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And don't forget, God sees you, he hears you, he loves you because you were his. God Hears Her would not exist without the help of Kathy and Candace and Mary Jo. Thank you so much for your help, friends.